Good evening, everyone. This is Dacia. I'm the director of Qualia Contemporary Art Gallery. Welcome all of you to our opening night. And thank you for joining us to celebrate the new show, Resonance. And we are very honored to have 4 artists, Terry Berlier and Paul DeMarinis, Guillermo Galindo, and Hu Xiangcheng with us, and our guest curator, Xiaoze Xie. So you probably just watched the short video. That was just a treat for the early birds. We're waiting for you to get on. As usual, I will play a short video, and as a virtual tool. In the past, each show we would do a Zoom opening, and we also just play a short video for the virtual tour for the people who cannot visit the gallery. But now I think the COVID is going to lift off all that, the regulations. By June 15th in California, I think we are completely back to normal. So welcome to visit our gallery. And although the video is made by a professional filmmaker, and I think he really put a lot of effort, it is great. Still, you just cannot replace the experience in the physical, gallery space. So please do come to visit us. For some of you, if you're, just new to the Zoom opening, you have never been to our Zoom opening, you have never been to our gallery, please check our website. I'm going to put on the chat so you can see our website. Go there and you can look at our old exhibitions. You can also subscribe it, so we will send you the announcement of every new show. After video 2, I will introduce the guest curator, Xiaoze Xie. So he's going to introduce all the artists. Each artist is going to give a presentation. And after that, we'll just open to the audience for Q&A, but feel free to type any of your questions in the chat. Okay, so I'm in the gallery. I can step away a little bit so you can have a good view of the main gallery. Now I'm going to start the virtual video tour. So share. Now I'm going to introduce the guest curator, Xiaoze Xie. Xiaoze is an internationally recognized artist and a professor of art at Stanford University. Xie has exhibited extensively in the US and internationally. His recent solo exhibition include objects of evidence at the Asian Society Museum in New York City and Eyes On at the Denver Art Museum. His work is in the permanent connections of such institutions, such as Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Denver Art Museum, San Francisco Asian Art Museum. One thing I can tell, he really likes to curate shows besides being an artist. So right now, I will just pass the baton to him.
I would like to, first of all, give my warm welcome to everyone who is zooming from everywhere in the world, including Shanghai, of course. And I would like to give my thanks to the 4 artists who have been working very hard to make this exhibition happen. I know that Paul and Xiangcheng have been working tirelessly to get new works finished for the exhibition, which happened in a very tight time frame. And Terry has had to update her computer program for her sculpture, sound sculpture. Guillermo at the opening brought in a new sculpture and did a improvisational performance right in the gallery in our small in-person opening. I feel the support and I'm very grateful for everyone's contribution. Some people may not be familiar with what a curator does. Even though my name is on the wall, I have not contributed any artworks to the exhibition except I put it together. So a curator usually would come up with an idea or a theme and select artists and works to make hopefully a cohesive exhibition in which artworks from different artists would engage dialogues with each other. It has been a humbling learning experience for me to put this show together. And the idea of doing an exhibition about sound came from studio visits, from learning more about works by my peers and colleagues. And to do the show for me is a way to express my admiration or maybe my envy for their work. The use of sound in visual art started in early 20th century among the futurists, Dadaists, and Surrealists, and has continued to evolve and expand as an important element in contemporary art to this day. I mean, you can think about all the multimedia installations that we see at the museums and biennales. So sound is now a familiar element. And sound art becomes an artistic discipline in which sound is the primary medium, situating somewhere between visual art and experimental music. This exhibition, though, is not literally a show of sound art, but rather an exhibition of multimedia or interdisciplinary artists. And in these works, some of these works, sound is directly present, is in the space, but more often sound is either transformed into visual and spatial forms. So if there's sound, you can only hear it in your imagination. Now back away, after putting the show together, now I think about what this show is about, this combination of sight and sound and a transformation between them, to me, philosophically speaks about the interdependence of space and time. And it provides potential ways for art to fully engage social realities. So this is an installation view. When I think of sound, what it means to me, when I think about sound and music, ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras would come to mind. And according to Pythagorean ideas, music is connected to the movement of the planets and the order of the universe. So he would call it a universal music. Sound is connected to mathematics. So I think sound could be translated through mathematical relationships into proportions, repetition, variation, and movements of visual forms, or vice versa. So in that sense, we look at this beautiful sculpture, this handmade wooden sculpture by Terry Berlier. One could say that it embodies inaudible music. And many works in the exhibition could be called visual sounds or sounding visions. And Hu Xiangcheng titled his work Sound of Trace. At the beginning, I thought it was Trace of Sound, but I think either way sounds okay. Sound is also connected to language. For example, in Paul's new work, sound becomes the most direct articulation of philosophical ideas. In this piece in particular, the dialectics of affirmation and negation, swings back and forth. And what I'm most interested about sound, though, is how sound is produced by and is therefore directly connected to objects in various contexts. Okay, so this is I meant to illustrate when I talk about what the curator does and does not. Then I talk about the theme of the exhibition, giving an installation view. And then this is Terry's sculpture, which you could describe as inaudible music. It translates, in my mind, it's connected to sounds through mathematical relationships, through proportion, repetition, and movements. In Paul's new work, abstract thinking and language. And now I'm interested in how sound is directly connected to various objects in different contexts with different kind of stories. Terry's this sculpture, which you can play with in the space, is made of a keyboard that Terry salvaged at the San Francisco Dam. She was going to talk a little bit more about it. And then the kind of objects used in Guillermo Galindo's sculptures, these are improvised instruments using objects that he found along US-Mexico border left behind by illegal immigrants who may not have made it to the land of promise. Then in Hu Xiangcheng's works, these objects are ornamental fragments from demolished houses in the rapid urbanization of China. So I hope that I found a way to connect these works together. And since Hu Xiangcheng could not come to the in-person opening last weekend, so we had him here to talk about his work via Zoom. But yesterday, as we tested, we found out that telecommunications was very unstable, it was intermittent. So I decided to speak on his behalf and give a brief introduction of his work and screen a short film. So this was a picture from my studio visit more than a year ago, before the pandemic, in Hu Xiangcheng's studio in the suburb of Shanghai. Behind, you can see monumental, thickly layered abstract paintings that the artist made. And I was particularly struck by this complex wooden sculpture with a mechanism. They will make all this rotation and various kind of movements and produce incredible range of sounds. Originally, we tried to do a smaller version here, but with shipping time and everything, so it did not, it wasn't realized. So just to introduce the background of artist Hu Xiangcheng. He was born in Shanghai and is now living and working in Shanghai. He became a professor at the art department of the Shanghai Theater Academy in the late 70s. And then he had lived in Japan, in Africa, and in Tibet. In 2002, Hu returned to China and began a project called the Rural Reconstruction Project, whose aim is to improve the lives of rural residents and simultaneously revive ancient Chinese culture and traditional practices. And I was just reading a little bit about his project, which he was engaged for more than 10 years. So these are some of the residencies that he designed with local people. And he was particularly interested in reviving traditional crafts and art forms, including performing arts and music and folk music. So this is the interior of a community center in one of the villages that Hu Xiangcheng walked in. Now this Hu Xiangcheng's band of folk musical instruments. So his fascination with music also had led him to do many pieces involving improvisation and experimental composition. So his involvement as what we might call today a social practice artist. He's also a designer and an art teacher and a painter. His involvement has led to his participation exhibition, a theme show called Mega Cities at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston in 2016. And he came for the show and gave lectures at Harvard University. Recently, I noticed that Hu Xiangcheng had solo exhibitions, including very large installations at major museums, including the Himalaya Museum of Art in Shanghai and the Zhejiang Provincial Museum of Art in Hangzhou and China Art Gallery in Beijing. And Hu Xiangcheng is also one of the founders of the Shanghai Biennial, which is now world renowned. And his work is in a collection of many museums and institutions in China, in Japan, in France, Australia, and the US. So this is a group of six works on paper, which Hu Xiangcheng made with ink rubbing from those ornamental architectural fragments and tools and old address plates. There are no places, they are no longer around. These are to me, kind of like photograms, you know, just layers of images. Some of them ghost-like, some of them really punchy and striking. And I'm going to screen one of his short films about his creative process, which will help you to understand how these works on paper come about. This is one of them, my personal pick, including these abstract movements that flows to the composition on the surface of paper. It preserves the echoes of these cultural elements. They are now disappearing. This is a detail to help you get a sense of the rich visual texture of the work. And as an extension of his work in this exhibition, Hu Xiangcheng did an installation at the Miaoshan Museum of Art in a suburb of Beijing, of Shanghai, sorry. He used this ink rubbing to make three-dimensional house-like structures and present them as objects. You see in the background, there is more linear structure of those old houses. They are so familiar to me. And this is the space that Hu Xiangcheng is zooming from. It's this indoor space of the Miaoshan Art Museum. And you can see various tools, woodworking tools, and those are on the floor, and ink rubbings also on the floor. There are architectural models. There is linear structures on the shelves to the right. And I actually don't know about this big sculpture in the center left. It looks really curious. I can perhaps say that Hu Xiangcheng's work is theatrical, and perhaps that comes from his training at the theater academy in his early years. So I'm going to play a video.
这个。
So as you can see from the working process, Hu's work is not only about destruction and loss of memory, but also about transformation and rebirth. So now that we have the artist here with us, I would like to invite him to say a few words to us. And if the internet connection is well, we'll continue a little bit. 胡老师，您可以打开话筒，然后说几句话。
你好，你好，听得见吗？
听得见 ，We can hear you。
很高兴啊，和大家一起远程的这个交流啊，这个是一个疫情发生后，大家还是通过现在的手段 能够听到大家的声音，很高兴。
I'm so happy to have this opportunity to communicate with you using contemporary technology, regardless of the pandemic.
我看到了这个在美国的各位艺术家的作品，很高兴，很荣幸和大家一起来参加这个专栏。
I feel privileged and honored to be part of this exhibition with artists in America.
其实这个我的这个声音是非常重要，因为我们人类已经到了太空，对吧？实际上在太空里面是没有声音的，这个声音其他星球我们也不清楚有没有声音，对吧？但是太空中我们人感觉不到声音。
We're not sure if in other planets in the universe would have sound, but it seems to me the sound is unique to the Earth. It's important for us, and it's certainly an important element, has been an important element in my work. Looks like the internet isn't very good. Thank you very much, 胡老师，谢谢。信号不是非常好，好吗？
那行了，
谢谢。Thank you.
再见。
So this is indeed very unusual. So next, I would like to introduce artist Paul DeMarinis. To me, Paul is just a genius who started making all kind of devices using wires and batteries in his childhood. And as early as the 1970s, Paul started to gain significant recognition as a pioneer of sound and media art. Paul has exhibited and performed extensively in North America, in Europe, and in Asia. In 2010, he had an artist residency, a solo exhibition, which published a monograph at the DAAD Gallery in Berlin. And some of you might remember seeing his elegant installation at SF MoMA in 2017. So Paul, thank you for being with us.
Hi, thanks, Xiaoze. Yeah, I think my real interest in sound concerns noises right now. Both language and noises have been kind of my central concerns and the reason I use sound. Language for its way of structuring our experience and meaning in communication. But noise, especially because it brings us into a moment of immediacy. A noise that means nothing or maybe means something is a call to our ears directly. It's kind of a short circuit through everything that we know to reality. And I would love to show you some of my pieces that use noise. Unfortunately, Zoom filters out noise. Anything it hears that is noise-like, it decides is not language or music, and it filters it out. So it's kind of a censor for the thing that's of most of interest to me. One piece, let me share a little here. I'll share a few images. So yeah, one of the pieces that I really like that uses noise, but I can't play it for you, is called Tympanic Alley, which is just made of loudspeakers acting as motors and propelling little tappers across little pie tins. And it creates a kind of sound that comes into your ears and makes otoacoustic emissions. That is, your ear itself produces the sound that you hear in this piece. Related to this show, there's an earlier piece I did using language called Hypnica that uses multiple metronomes that speak to you in the voice of a hypnotist. Sometimes I do pieces that are large-scale installations, and this piece, Rain Dance, makes sound by water tapping on umbrellas. It plays music, and And it became part of the exhibition at Expo 98 in Lisbon for the Swatch Pavilion. So installation, and has been shown many times since then. Some of the works Desha asked me to speak about are the long prints from 2008 that are on the wall. And these are made with a technique also related to an earlier form of photography, slit scan photography, that was used in finish lines for races, horse races or human races, to determine the first person who crossed the finish line. And this is from an earlier actual film camera, but this is basically the technique that I used to make these photographs. You're just looking at one place, the finish line in the photograph. I made a number of pieces. This one actually made on film called Tongues of Fire, which is speech. They're the war speeches of George Bush going to war in the Middle East, and all of the various untruths that he spoke are recorded as landscapes of fire. That is, these are the vibrations of his voice, and this is the time axis. So it's actually recording on film a speech in fire. But what I did for these works that are in the gallery in Qualia is I used a language that a lot of artists use called Max MSP to take a film and render it into slit scan images. So here we have the prints. They are based on a movie by Jean-Luc Godard from 1967, I believe, called Weekend. And one of the scenes is a traffic jam. Where the camera is moving continuously along this long country road. And by applying the slit scan technique to the movie, I created this print, which has several views in different parts of the frame. So they're all different. In this piece, the whole piece was called Early Media Goes to the Movies, and it all used 19th century media technologies to take another look at Godard's movie. And there's a set of stereographic cards that you can hold up and see the 1967 non-stereoscopic movie in stereo by looking at the frames that are about 12 frames apart in the movie. There's another scene that is a long print that's not in this show that is based on a scene of a panoramic around a country town where there's a pianist playing Mozart and that is along with Mozart's music. Here there's also a music box that you can scroll through and crank and see the scene, and these little dots are the play of the music box. So here's the Mozart music record. And the final scene is the scene.
Faites penser à ces déménageurs qui ont refusé de transporter André Breton quand il est mort. Mais non, je vais vous expliquer. Joseph Balsamo, c'est le fils de Dieu et d'Alexandre Dumas. Dieu était un vieux PD, tout le monde sait.
And this is a projection device that projects this in 16 layers of glass, electrical glass. And also there's this print that is in the gallery. So all in all, 6 objects, 3 of them prints and 3 of them impossible media devices. Thank you.
Paul, thank
There
you
it is.
so much.
Found it. Got it.
That's so fascinating. I mean, each time I look at Paul's work, there's always something new to learn. And there are always things that I never get to fully understand. And that's the charm of the work. I invite you to come to the gallery and maybe you can figure out more than myself. Okay, now you're already familiar with Terry Berlier's work. At the beginning, before we formally started, we actually were watching a video clip of her sculptures used as instrument in a performance. Terry Berlier is known for kinetic sculpture, and she teaches sculpture at Stanford Art Department. Terry has exhibited and performed extensively in the US, in Asia, and in Europe. Her recent exhibitions, including shows at the YBCA, the Contemporary Jewish Museum, and Stanford Art Gallery, where about more than a year ago, she had a solo exhibition. Terry has participated in many artist residencies, and she would make work there during the stay, and she quite frequently collaborates with performance artists and musicians. Another artist whose career with creative practice is interdisciplinary. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Xiaoze. I'm just gonna share my screen and I'll show a few images and I'll try to play a few videos if it works. This is an early piece I did called Two Pan Tops Can Meet, and it was based on a homophobic saying in Jamaica, where I worked as a Peace Corps volunteer after I got out of undergrad. And the saying was translated to me that 2 vaginas can't come together. So playing with that and coming back to the States and finding mismatched pan lids in thrift stores, I started collecting the pan lids and I made these pan lid couples that hung from the ceiling, and they were hung on speaker wire, and housed inside each of them were these little telephone speakers from the old school receiver telephones, and it played a sound piece mantra that was contradicted the original saying. So it said 2 pan tops can meet, 2 pan tops can meet, over and over again. And when you say can or can't multiple times, I think on the telephone, it often is misread as the wrong thing. So also playing with that understanding of speech. And while I was making that piece, I started setting aside the pan lids that resonated really well. I think they were like a cast aluminum. I'll play a sound clip of some musicians in San Francisco. The Living Earth show actually played them last weekend. So for me, the pan lids represent queerness and a reclaiming, kind of a delayed reaction to that homophobic statement. So a lot of these sound works I create, I don't necessarily have I invite musicians and composers to perform on them, as well as audience members that enter the gallery space. And I'm currently working with those musicians and a composer in New York, Sarah Hennes, on a longer concert lake performance with new instruments or sound sculptures that I'm making to work with that will premiere at the Clarice at the University of Maryland in December. This is a piece in the gallery called Where the Beginning Meets the End. And it's a piece I made while in residence at the San Francisco Dump Ecology. And the pieces takes a well-known solo or duo instrument, the piano, and turns it into a circle, and so it becomes a community instrument that can be played by anyone. I think you already saw the sound clip at the beginning, so I'll just play a second of this. And all the parts from the piano were salvaged from the dump, even the laptop computer that ran it. And then I used a computer keyboard to reprogram the keys to work with the computer, and use the similar program, the same program that Paul talked about, Max MSP, to reprogram the computer keys to play the piano keys, and just used a MIDI file of the 88 keys sounds. This is a piece called This Side Up, Handle with Care. And it was a half-size model of my house at the time. And half of it is flipped upside down. And instead of walls, there's a piano string that runs along the house vertically. And the piano string serves two functions, where it actually structurally is required to hold the house up. It strengthens the design of the house, and it works much like a suspension bridge technology. And viewers are invited to play this as well. And I have worked with composers again and invited them to perform and compose on it. And I'll play a quick sound clip of composer Luciana Quesa's piece, an excerpt from that, and Laura Steenberg also did a piece for it. The first time I installed this piece, it was inside, and this was outside at the Montalvo Art Center in Saratoga, where I was in residence. And when I was installing this piece, I was standing up here on a ladder, and the beautiful thing about having it outdoors is the wind started playing it, and it started humming like an Aeolian harp. And it kind of, I almost, I was trying to figure out what was happening on the ladder, and then I realized I just got the perfect gust of wind, and it started playing. The other thing, that the entire house, the wood was made from fairly old reclaimed Douglas fir, and the wood resonated quite well. So at the opening at the Stanford Art Gallery a couple of years ago, everyone started laying on the sculpture and trying to hear the piece. These are the clips from Luciana Quesa and Laura Steenberg. So again, two different composers working very differently with the sculpture. This is a piece called When Comes the Sun from I think 2012, and I made this piece when I was in residence in Norway in the summer, and it was the first time I experienced pretty close to 24-hour sun. It would get to be dusk about 3 hours of the day in June in Trondheim, Norway. And so I went with the idea of thinking all the work I would make there would be made by the sun, whether this is a solar powered sculpture and that plays the Beatles' Here Comes the Sun. And I also made a series of cyanotypes there. Here's a clip of the piece in Norway. And so the speed of the motor is controlled by the solar panel. So as clouds come over, the piece will stop playing. So it can go from playing a really slowed down version that sounds like a tape cassette dying or something, or a really sped up kind of punk rock version of the song. And sometimes it hits the sweet spot. When I showed it in California, in Palo Alto, it seems to just go pretty fast. This is a piece called the Stair Drum that combined conductor's podium with a South American instrument, the cajon. And it was a way of trying to bring conductors down a few notches and elevate the cajon. You can't walk on the podium, the conductor's podium, but you can play all the stairs and the side of it. And I think we saw a clip of this in the beginning already. So I'll just show you a brief clip. And this was a part of this is Chris Fro, a percussionist playing, and it was part of I think a half-hour piece composed in DC. This is the percussion ball that we saw earlier. And it takes a percussion instrument that can be rolled across the stage, and the different length tubes inside it resonate so to create different pitches. I wanted to kind of create this really chaotic and unpredictable sound sculpture that would be performed and could be rolled around and allow the percussionist to move around the stage more. This is an acoustic locator. The sculpture is called that, which is based on the same name of acoustic locators, which were pre-radar devices used in military to detect propeller planes coming. And this was made while I was in residence at Recology. So these are all things made out of garbage this is like an old column, old plywood, and this is like old wire wheels or first spools of wire. This is also made at Recology. This is called Smart and Final, which is a big box store in America. And the grocery cart has that actual name on it, Smart and Final. And it's filled with cement, and was thinking about the weight of all the waste. And you really see it when you're in the artist residency at Recology, and the weight that all that garbage has on the environment, and how consumerism, the weight that has on all of us as individuals. So this is a grocery cart that I filled with cement. This is the piece in the show called Non-Orientatable Cocodera, and this is a series of Mobius sculptures, and the non-orientatable is I guess how mathematicians would describe the Mobius strip, which is instead of just a circle, it has one flip in it as it goes around. So if you run your hand along it, the inside becomes the outside, and vice versa. And so this is a series based on Sarah Ahmed's idea of queer phenomenology, and thinking about her idea of desire lines, which is a landscape architecture term that talks about the paths that veer off of the main. So when you're walking on a sidewalk, that's what the designers have designed for you to walk on. But when you start cutting through the grass, and that line that starts forming in the grass is called a desire line. And so thinking about those as these queer paths, or these deviations from the mainstream. And each of the Mobiuses are nested on these pillows of which are photographs of from different places in nature. This is the Bedwell Salt Flats in right by Facebook in Menlo Park. The first one was of the Moss Temple in Japan, and this one is a rock covered in lichen that's growing this bright lichen color. This is a piece called Waiting for the Other Shoe to Drop. And I'll just maybe end with a little clip of this. So there's an American saying, waiting for the other shoe to drop, which references this impending doom. So thinking about the last US presidency, and how the violence towards queer, trans, BIPOC folks, and watching rights being stripped away. And so this idea that you never know when the shoe's going to drop, and you never know when that harm is going to happen. So it's both, but also I think it's kind of a humorous take on the saying. And so there's a choreographed programmed piece for about 20 minutes, and then it culminates in the end with all of them falling together. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. This really gives us a great overview of your practice, and made me realize that the 3 pieces we included in the exhibition is just a little bit of teaser for everyone. So check out Terry's website to see these projects again. And I realized in each, for me, a successful artwork would have many layers. Like, for example, in Terry's works, there's the humorous wordplay, the inventive forms, architecture, the sound. There's also, various subjects, either personal or environmental or even political. So really intellectually engaging. Thank you, Terry. Now I would like to turn it to artist Guillermo Galindo. Guillermo is a Mexican-American artist who is celebrated both as experimental composer and musician and a visual artist. Guillermo's work has been exhibited in major museums and art biennales worldwide, including Documenta 14 in Kassel, Germany. That was in 2017. Pacific Standard Time in 2017, and Fiasque in 2018, and Art Basel 2018 to 19. There are too many exhibitions. Now he's in right now. I know that he's been busy traveling from one city to another to exhibit and talk about his work. Now, I believe that Guillermo is zooming from San Diego, where he's had been an artist residency at the Lux Art Institute. Welcome, Guillermo.
Hi, Xiaoze, thank you. I'm gonna start like with how I put together the concepts of sound art, performance, and visual spirituality and activism. And well, first is I was dealing with the concept of can music sound be representational, or can the visual and oral, the performative, and consolidated into a single unit or gestalt? So it's putting together all the concepts that I learned through composition, music composition training, and putting into a practice that it reflects social, political, and spiritual messages. So I took 5 directions. That was a long time ago. Performance ritual, bringing attention to issues of social justice, art and sound as healing practices, and translating any kind of data or code into the time-based events. So I perform a little bit with Guillermo Gomez Peña. I created these like performance personages to perform my own build on instruments. And also I got a big influence of Enrique Chagoya, which talked to me a lot about reverse anthropology. And we have this piece called Abapuro in 1928, in which we see this subject that has a very little head and big legs. And it's a piece that is a very important piece for me, because it shows how the Latin American people are seen through the Western eye. And then, of course, this is Enrique Chagoya's comments on contemporary Western art forms in Andy Warhol and in Monet. And for me, it was always very interesting to be able to see what Western culture has, the way that Western culture has approached Latin American and rest of the world cultures, no, in colonialism, no, and so I wanted to take the other side, no, being the witness from the other side, and then I studied film scoring composition at the Berklee College of Music, and we have this thing about narrative. So I did this piece that embraces the underworld of love of the forgotten lovers from the disadvantaged people of the inner city neighborhoods of Mexico City. And I took pictures of Maya Godet and did this narrative. But this is a very important part of myself, like how narrative and sound becomes symbol and becomes archetype. So this is a thing that I commissioned for the Paul Dresser Ensemble. This is more inclined towards music, but I'm gonna move on after this towards my more gallery work. So you can check this out. Yeah, this is a piece that explores the people of the inner city, Mexico City, and alternative ways of love, older people, non-binary relationships, and all of these things. So it's a narrative based in photographs of amazing photographer Maya Godet from Mexico City. But let me move a little bit of to the concept of resonance that can be used as a metaphor to represent a unique and common mediator that allows mutual understanding and compassion between people. And my first attempts to use sonic devices as healing objects. Here in the left-hand side, you can see my first healing device that is called Maiz, in which I use my own items, personal items, to create an instrument to heal. Because what we see a lot in Native American cultures and pre-Columbian cultures is that the sound that any object makes is connected to our own ecosystem and animism that surrounds us. So the only way to heal with sound is to use the sound as the instruments of the objects that surround us. And then the musical score can be defined as a set of codified symbols written on a piece of paper or any other readable surface to be translated into sound events to be reproduced in real time. So these are the first attempts that I did to translate a movement of elements through space and sound. And interestingly, I see this as a precursor of what I was going to do about the sounds of the border. You can see in the left side, like these elements moving together into a center, crossing a border, and then dispersing into the right side. Obviously, I was based in the late 20th century notation of music. He said some David Tudor and Silvano Bussotti piece, which crosses literally the borders or the boundaries between sound, graphics, and music and the visual arts. So this is one of the first things that I did with graphics course, 177 separate pages to be set in 4 walls in a gallery space and to be played by musicians. And then we go into sonic biogenesis, what I'm showing at the Qualia right now, which is a musical compositions and artwork merging textures of plants, animals, and microbes. This piece illustrates in a unique symbolic language how research and data have historically expressed and sustained systems of power, particularly relating to colonialism. So sonic biogenesis was originally made for the Pacific Standard Time in a show that they were showing codexes that where the Europeans used to codify the flora and fauna from the Americas, usually through a religious window. So they saw everything, every plant and animal through a religious window and through their own way of interpreting things. And this kind of almost hallucinogenic way of seeing things, plants and animals that they never seen before. So I thought that the best thing was to answer to this exhibit by looking at the contemporary way of looking at these things, which is the biogenetic industry, which is actually naming genes or appropriating genes of plants and animals. And here we have like my scores that are mixed amoeba with cactuses. So I thought that it would have been a very interesting comment on contemporary culture to approach this biogenetic industry and the way they are appropriating genetic data. And here's this other score. These are made in plexiglass and aluminum. And I wanted to give the look of looking through a microscope, this three-dimensional look to a future that we're creating towards mutant jungles in the future. And then I made this. I'm trying to create this into an opera. So I started making instruments that are based in animal bones. This instrument is made out of the structure of turtle bones. You can see it here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about border cantos because it's my project with Richard Misrach, photographer. And in this project, it's a collaboration. And it's an exchange and dialogue between two different nationalities and disciplines. Richard Misrach is a very well-known photographer. And I'm a musician and visual artist. So this is several things that we talk in context: pre-Columbian ritual concepts, religious sacred relics, rascuachismo, prosopopeia. And like I told you, there was an intimate, in the pre-Columbian world, there was an intimate connection between the musical instruments and life. A sonic device was a talisman of connectedness that dissolved the border between the spiritual and the physical worlds. Sound was a part of the essence of the object and its meaning to the world. The sound and object couldn't be separated. So what the pre-Columbian people did is made instruments out of people's bones, out of a tree that was outside of your house, so that in order that sound would be healing, it would be connected to your natural environment. And also the Spanish brought this thing that was called relics, and it was believed that if you keep the bones or the remains of a saint or a sacred person, you would be communicated to them, and they hold this in churches and little boxes and things in churches. I grew up seeing all of this stuff. And then we have prosopopeia, which is a rhetorical device in which a speaker or writer communicates to the audience by speaking another person or object. So what we have here is a situation in which the objects or the animals around a story narrate the story itself. And here is some a little video of a performance that I did using an instrument where I use bones that I found in a site in Laredo from immigrants, and where I found a number of backpacks with items belonging to immigrants. So basically, that's it's a piece that is made with instruments that were made with immigrants items, and it's very interesting. I'm approaching what I learned in music school, which is a combination of Western music and music from other parts of the world. The zither that I made from bones and strings from immigrants items is very much found in Asia, in the guzheng, in Chinese instruments, and it's very much found also in the Japanese koto. So the music that is produced is not precisely with Western tunings, but it explores other dimensions of tuning. And I kind of like relate to it as if you go to another planet and if there's ethnic music from another planet, you connect into this very deep musical and sound atmosphere that unites alternative ways of perception. But well, now talking about this particular thing, this is a fountain that was made out of these water tanks. They hold 6 gallons of water, and they are put in the desert by a humanitarian organization called water stations. And they're usually vandalized by militia, and they're shot, and they make holes in it. So where they were holes, I put these hoses, and it's a fountain, and from the top of the tank, the water drops down to the metal surface, and it makes a very meditative, beautiful sound. And this piece is actually showing right now at the High Line in New York. I'm very proud of it. And the other thing is I've been dealing a lot with very ancient notation and graphic things that I've seen in the border. This is in a gulch where immigrants cross. And we saw a lot of elements that were about 20 to 30,000 years old of graphic notation and histories and documentation of things. So I started putting these in the flags that show where the water is, the immigrants' water stations. So I think all of these watches of how we used to keep track of time, these are musical scores as well. And they kind of define how we are able as human beings to keep track of time, just watching the planets and watching at nature instead of our computer or cell phone. And well, I did this installation for Crystal Bridges that is traveling around the nation, and I based it in the calendar of Venus of the Aztecs and the Mayans, which is 260 days, a week of 13 days versus a month of 20 days, and they come back together after 260 days, and I turn this into minutes. And I made this composition. It took me a year to make it. This is a score of the composition. And important thing to think is every instrument that I have from the border, the sound comes out of the speaker underneath the platform where they're set. And you can move around, and you have 4 hours and 20 minutes to hear the piece. And it's not only an aural experience, but it's a visual and a spatial experience. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. Then I have like this, all of these objects that are made of bags that people throw across the border. Bags are very interesting because they don't show up in sensors, and you can also ride them really fast. So they are thrown across the border. So I made this, I've been doing these comments, coming back to Chagoya's reverse anthropology, you know. These are comments on Marcel Duchamp, ready-made. I call it listo or ready to go. This bike is made of immigrants. This instrument is made of a bike from an immigrant and a chair of the Border Patrol. Then there's these tires that are used, they drag them in order to track the footprints of the immigrants. And I made this one in comment of Leonardo da Vinci Martello, which is one of the first mechanical objects to substitute human labor. So instead, I made a drum out of the tires that they drag to erase and re-identify the footprints of the immigrants. And instead of a hammer, it plays this Lakota drum that I made out of the tire, and it has a shoe and a glove of an immigrant. And here's a little bit of it. I don't know how much to do.
Can't hear the sound.
Okay, I think are we almost done? How are we doing time-wise, Xiaoze?
Don't worry, you are fine.
Okay, thank you. So later on, after Border Cantos, I was invited to Documenta 14. I did this piece called Eco Exodus. And I started collecting things from refugee camps in Germany and in Greece, in the old airport, which used to be a refugee camp in Athens. So I pick up these tablecloths. I made some scores out of tablecloths that even have food in it, in Kassel, Germany. And these military blankets, which have the map of immigration to Europe. And also this instrument that was made of that bed that you saw before, the military bed that was donated to the camps. And I put in between springs holding bicycle parts that were donated to the immigrant camps in Kassel, Germany. And on the right side, we have like this quilt that I made out of all of those clothes that you saw before in the Athens airport. And it came into this called the sonophagus, and was showing Athens, Germany, and Athens, Greece. And here's my percussionist playing it. Okay, that's so in Lesbos in Greece, I found a lot of tubes, which you don't find in the Mexican-US border, to make a lot of wind instruments. And I created all of these things made out of toys from refugee camps in Germany. This one that is a waterphone. It contains a pot that I found in a refugee camp, and a plate that it's that I found in Lesbos, and toys, you know, that are donated to the refugee camps. It's where I went in Lesbos. This is like literally the scenery that I found. It was at the time when the European Union was holding the immigrants from coming in. So there was this very empty space, you know, and I found all of these wreckage boats from immigrants. So I said, I want these boats in Germany from Greece. And it was a big thing to happen. And I photographed them and I located them. And yeah, I brought them back to Germany. This is a bringing back of the boat to Germany. And I turned them into these enormous musical sound objects. And I made this name that is, I know that in German you can make names. So I made this enormous word. As Fluch, escape, seal, destination, Europe, Europa, shipwreck, factor, sound or echo, body, sound body. And I hung it, and I identify how one can connect between conceptual art and meaningful social humanitarian art. So this is, I put some piano strings in the one in the right. I put some percussion stuff in the one on the left. I made some scores, played, and here we go. So this was a Syrian wedding singer. It was really interesting because she didn't know any German or any English or anything. We communicated through through sound and music. It was beautiful. And these are my beautiful German musicians that did a really good job with my. Okay, so that's basically it. Yeah, I think that's it. So it's a lot of things that are together about humanitarian issues, about building sound devices, that can communicate and connect with people, and also about translation of data and other things into graphic scores and graphic notation. So that's my exploration at this point, and that's where I am. Thank you, everybody.
Wow. Thank you so much, Guillermo. This is mind-blowing.
Thank you.
You are indeed one of a kind artist who could
Thank
move
you.
so freely between the concert hall and the museum space. It's very, very rare.
Thank you.
By now, I know that our audience probably realize that in contemporary art, you know, the boundaries between different kind of mediums, different disciplines, does no longer exist. You know,
Same as in life. There are no borders between anything, between races, between genders, between anything. We have to avoid all sorts of divisions between people. That's my point, probably.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Let's give our rounds of applause to our 4 outstanding artists. And thank you all for wonderful presentations. I myself learned so much more. I probably would have done a better job putting together the show after all this, hearing all these talks. So we're not talking about the appreciation of time-based art, you know, sound and music, process-based art. We realized that it takes a bit of time to do that more fully. And now it's we have passed well, almost 2 hours. I would like to well, maybe two or three questions from the audience. Anyone?
My question is, my question, or I would not say request, I would appreciate, maybe if you could please elaborate a little bit on the healing device that you showed.
Yes, I do feel that sound can be a healing device, and I've been doing a lot of research on this. And I do believe that that there's a possibility of using sound as a transmitter of resonance, given that all of our bodies and our minds and our physical bodies resonate to certain frequencies. So definitely, my whole idea of what I'm doing is to find a way to communicate sound that is beyond the Western idea of music, which is just to make something beautiful and to you know to make art as something beautiful. It's more of an idea of trying to resonate or create frequencies that could actually makes us communicate to others and provide healing, provide empathy, resonance, and healing. So I mean, it has existed through ages. It's not a new thing, and it's present in every culture, in every society. And I think it's a thing of the future. We're already using in medicine and technology, we're already using sound as a tool for identifying babies in sonograms, for a lot of things. But I think that sound is a very effective way of connecting to our very inward vibrations, electrons, and whatever, like multiple particles that we have in our bodies. So aside from being a spiritual thing, I think it could be a very interesting scientific approach.
Great. Thank you. Totally agree.
You're welcome.
Have you using your healing device systemically to see the effect of your healing device?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Okay, have you using your hearing device systemically test, particularly using the, your musician composer perspective, frequency, different condition and so on. Have you tested those, or have you compared those or demonstrate those?
Yes, I've been doing a lot of performances, and I run into very interesting and different reactions from the people. It's very interesting because I was doing the same dissonant music. If you are familiar with contemporary classical music, the late 20th century music becomes kind of dissonant in quotation marks, because dissonant can relate to a very Western understanding of what is music. But it's very interesting because I'm playing the same dissonant music that I would play in European instruments, in my own instruments, and people kind of like feel that they're going to the desert, that they identify with immigrants, that they identify with other things. And it's very interesting. It's a very interesting psychological or psychoacoustic connection. And I do believe that there's a way to connect through sound and music, and to heal with sound and music. Because you see it, in the music of the Amazon, you see it in the old Tibetan monks, you see it in the African music. And that's probably the very, very, very much the root of what I'm trying to do here, aside from art in quotation marks. I'm trying to dig into something deeper. It's a very personal thing.
That's great. Thank you very much.
I have a question for that Mexico artist, if I may.
Yes, Amo.
I missed out a little bit. There's something like an animal, the bones, you can make the sound to connect something. I'm not quite sure what's that mean. Would you please explain a little bit? Thanks.
I found those bones in a site where there were a couple of backpacks of people carrying their personal items, and I used the bones as bridges for the strings. I think that there's a deep connection. When you use animal bones, they have a very particular resonance, and I think they were boar. There's a lot of boar in that region. I think what they were telling me is when you let pigs, like farm pigs, out in the wild, they become boars. They grow hair and they become boars. There's a lot of like wild boars in that area, so that's the bones that I'm using.
Okay. Is any related to what you read, or is any related to your culture, or how they connect? I mean, the idea why they come from, how they come from.
Well, they were abandoned in a site of where immigrants left their belongings. They usually leave their belongings because they're encountered by the border patrol, or because they have to leave for some reason. But it's like if you find a particular place where there are all of these things left, like if something happened there and you're kind of picking it up, making instruments and recreated what happened there. I don't know if I'm being very clear about this, but it's like when you go to a crime scene and you're trying to build up what happened in a crime scene. I
see. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Guillermo, I really liked your comment when you say the ultrasound and does all this medical imaging, so the sound actually convert to visual.
Well, you're a scientist, so.
Yeah.
So you know better about that than me.
So yeah, my question for you is, I wonder, because you are like you know, in the music and also in the visual art. So I wonder, when you create a piece of work for a museum, for gallery, and or when you create a piece for a concert hall, is there any difference, or for you right now the dividing line is quite obscure?
Oh, the dividing line is always obscure. You know, I was just telling you, the borders should be obscured, you know. The borders shouldn't exist. There should be a bridge between all borders of race, gender, anything, you know, like art and visual art. I don't think there should be any borders. We should be free to cross from one place to another.
Right, but right now, you know, based on the concert hall, most of the time the setting, would you still try to like or adjust a little bit, or you try to make them to fit, you know, in your work?
No, I don't adjust. I just like you go adrift and navigate anywhere that the tide takes me, you know.
I see. Thank you. That's very
Yeah, so questions between artists are okay too.
Paul is still here. Otherwise, I want to ask him a question.
I've been a fan of Paul for ages, and I love Terry's work.
Yeah.
And I Xiaoze Xie work, beautiful work. So I would like to hear from them, you know.
Okay, I do have one question for Terry. I wonder if, Terry, do you perform on your own? Well, I know that you collaborate with musicians in performance a lot, but when you make a piece, do you usually perform yourself? And do you like do any kind of form of composition at all?
I do sometimes perform with them, but it's usually not in a very musical sense. And maybe creating some noise or doing a very like an action or an event. So even my kinetic sculptures that are more focused on a kinetic or conceptual action, I sometimes will do a performance at the opening or while during the exhibition. And so I'm often doing something like, I don't know, just doing a simple action like using a hammer or things like that. And yeah.
Then a related question is, when you make your objects, those instruments, do you seek input from like composers and musicians? For example, like say, oh, you know, this sound, it would be nice to have these higher tones, higher pitches in combination with lower ones and so on. Or you just finish the piece and then let the performance use it as an instrument.
It depends. It depends on the piece. The pieces are usually very conceptually driven, you know, relating around queerness or ecology in the environment. And so I'm trying to follow those threads. If I am working on like a larger performance collaboration, like the project I'm working on now, I'm talking a little bit to the musicians and to the composer as I construct. But I'm often like, I'm not, I guess with the exception of the Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, I'm not usually interested in like the Western idea of music and 12 notes. So I'm interested in just finding sounds and how those sounds relate to queerness and the environment. And so trying to pull out those sounds that are maybe a little bit more unexpected or are not known, sort of discovering them as I go along.
Great, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, certainly goes beyond the traditional kind of music theory and harmonies and whatnot. Okay, so Well, I would like to thank our audience again for coming. It's a long evening, but I think it's a lot of fun. And I want to give my thanks to our artists for contributing such a great work and being so eloquent discussion their work. Have a nice evening, everyone. Come to the gallery and visit. The show will be up to end of July, so you have plenty of time to experience these pieces. And there's always more to discover when you spend time in the space.
Yeah, especially for this show, I think if you spend more time, and you can really discover a lot of things. I want to thank all the artists and thank the audience. And Xiaoze, thank you.
Thank you, both of you.
Mm,
You put together an amazing show. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
Bye.
Bye.